In a minute, if you guys would turn to 1 Samuel chapter 17. King David had a rough life. The unfortunate part is that a lot of it could have been avoided. King David originally, he was a shepherd. He watched his father's flock and tended to them, made sure they were safe. He protected them when they needed it. He fought off lions and bears. In 1 Samuel 17:37, David says as God is the one that protected him while he was fighting off what he needed to. 1 Samuel 17 verse 37 says, "And David said, The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear, he will deliver me from the hand of the Philistines. And Saul said to David, Go, and may the Lord be with you." David wasn't afraid when he fought off the bears and fought off the lions. He wasn't afraid when he fought Goliath. All because of one thing. David knew that God was protecting him. David knew that when he went in to fight whatever it was he was going to fight, he was protected by God. When no one else would go out against Goliath, a boy that knew he had God with him went out and did what many wouldn't dare. He will deliver me. Those are the words that I think that might have gone through David's head when he's standing there looking at this giant with a sling and a rock. David had faith in God. David trusted that God would help him through any circumstance. And because of David's faith, he was rewarded. He became a leader in the armies of Saul, and eventually he became the king. But it wasn't smooth sailing all the way up to that point. After Goliath, David was chased by Saul. Saul threatened to kill him and even tried to a few times. Throughout all of this, I imagine that David was slightly afraid. He's afraid that Saul would find him, Saul would kill him. But David knew one thing throughout all of this, is that he will deliver me. God was with David on every occasion throughout all of his life. Unfortunately, David wasn't always like this. As he grew, he had to face more and more issues, more and more struggles. Sorry, I lost my spot there. He was chased down by Saul, faced with many different enemies when he was king. And unfortunately, as he went through all of this, he didn't always handle things like he did with Goliath. In 2 Samuel 12, he's faced with a different kind of challenge. 2 Samuel verse 12, or chapter 12. Chapter 12, verse 9. "Why have you despised the word of the Lord by doing evil in his sight? You have struck down Uriah the Hittite with the sword, have taken his wife to be your wife, and have killed him with the sword of the sons of Ammon." At this part is David and Bathsheba. Although Bathsheba wasn't a giant, yelling and screaming and threatening him, it was a different kind of struggle for him. And if David had reacted like he did with Goliath, putting all his trust in God and fighting this new giant, things might have been different. Whether it was a giant he needed to face down or his own desire, both those were major roadblocks for David. But the way that he handled them was completely different. With Goliath, David trusted God completely. And with Bathsheba, he pushed God aside and said, I know better. If you go back a little bit in 2 Samuel chapter 12, verse 7, it says, "It is I who anointed you king of Israel. It is I who delivered you from the hands of Saul." God is basically putting David in his place. He's telling him, it's because of me that you're here. It's because of me, this is who you are. David chose to move away from God. He chose to do what he wanted and not what God wanted. As David grew, so did his ego. Unfortunately, he began to think he was able to make better decisions. When David first started, when he was a shepherd, he was not afraid of anything because he trusted completely in God. Not a single part of him was not of God. Every single part of what he did was because of God. He knew that God would help him succeed when he was struggling. When we were young, we were relying on our parents. We trust them to protect us, feed us, and teach us. But as we get older, we begin to think, I got this. I can do this by myself. But whenever something bad happens, where do we go? Our parents are there to help us when we fall. David failed to realize this. He decided, I'm the king. I can do what I want, when I want. He failed to remember where he came from and why he was in the position he's in the first place. Psalms 142, 1 through 7. I'm going to read that real quick. I cry aloud with my voice to the Lord. I make supplication with my voice to the Lord. I pour out my complaint before him. I declare my trouble before him. When my spirit was overwhelmed within me, you knew my path and the way where I walk. They have hidden a trap for me. Look to the right and see, for there is no one who regards me. There is no escape for me. No one cares for my soul. I cried out to you, O Lord. I said, you are my refuge, my portion in the land of the living. Give heed to my cry, for I am brought very low. Deliver me from my persecutors, for they are too strong for me. Bring my soul out of prison, so that I may give thanks to your name. The righteous will surround me, for you will deal bountifully with me. In my footnote, it says David wrote this psalm when he was hiding in the cave. And I'm not sure if that's hiding in the cave from Saul or hiding in the cave from Absalom, but I assume during that time when he wrote this, he was scared. He didn't know what was going to happen, but he knew that God had this. The one that I had Brent read, 5 through 7, says, I cried out to you, O Lord. I said, you are my refuge, my portion in the land of the living. When he was afraid, he cried out to God. Didn't keep it to himself. He made sure that God knew he was in trouble and that he needed him. All David had to do throughout his life was cling to God and trust. Trust that God would deliver him through anything. Trust that God would be there for him when he needed it. I say all of this not to say that in our time of need, that's the only time that we need to cling to God. We should always be with him. We can't forget where it is that we came from or how we got there. It's a lot easier to get back up when there's someone there to help you. When I was a kid, I was walking to school with my mom. And I'm sitting there and I was holding her hand. And I was shorter than my mom back then. But as a kid, I was kind of stupid. I decided to jump in some leaves. Just big piles of leaves on the road. And they're sort of walking across the street. So I jumped in one and that was really cool. So I see like 3 or 4 more down the way. Get to the side of the road and jumped in all of them. I see the last one and I jumped in it. But what I didn't know is there's something underneath it. And that was a storm gutter. So it's kind of obvious what happened next, but I fell through all the way to my chest. Fortunately, I was holding onto my mom's hand. And that's the only reason that I didn't go all the way through. Our troubles might not be as big as giants. They're easy to see them coming. It's kind of hard to miss them. But sometimes they're gutters underneath the leaves. We don't see them coming. And that's when we need to be clinging to God, because that's when we need him most. Because we don't know when we're going to fall. We don't know what's coming, and we can't be sure what will happen. So cling to the one who does. Stay by his side all day, every day. And when you do face any task, he is always there to help. Don't grow too comfortable, or you might slip away. I'll leave you with this verse in Jeremiah 29:11. I think that everybody's heard this one once or twice. It's 11 through 13. For I know the plans that I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for welfare and not for calamity, to give you a future and a hope. Then you will call upon me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. You will seek me and find me when you search for me with all your heart. We must search for God with all of our heart. Not just when we need to, but at all times. God does have a plan for all of us. It's up to us, though, whether we will be like the older David, who did what he thought was right, or to be like the David who fought Goliath, putting all of his faith and trust in God. It's all up to us. If there's anyone here tonight who needs the help of the church, I'd like to encourage you to come forward as we stand and sing.